Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to today's edition of Lunch with Haley. We will begin in approximately 2 minutes. Well, good afternoon and good morning to our friends on the West Coast. We are excited to begin today's Lunch with Haley, where we have one of our partners, a guest from Appcast, Leah Daniels, the Senior Vice President of Strategy at Appcast, and we'll be talking about super simple tactics to get more out of your job board spend. My name is Matt Lozar, Director of Recruitment Marketing here at Haley Marketing, and today's presentation, where we've really increased the number of our presentations here in the last few months, has been to partner with other companies or share some of their awesome insight and information and valuable tips. Today, we'll be doing that with Appcast, a company in the job advertising programmatic industry, and Leah Daniels will now join us here and explain, her background, Appcast, and jump into the presentation on how we can get more out of the job board spend. And Leah, you are in a very exclusive club of a guest on the Haley Marketing podcast and also a guest webinar presenter. So that's...
Oh, I didn't know this was an exclusive club.
It grew by one today, so welcome.
Well, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, and I hope everyone's having lunch. I'm on the East Coast, so 8 hours ago, but no, it happens. Just a little bit about me. I also think I might be in a bit of an exclusive club, Matt. I have been in and around the recruitment technology space forever and a day, but I spent a solid 5 years at Bullhorn, which, as many of you guys know, is an ATS in the staffing space. So I feel like I am an honorary staffing technology person. And in my time there, I ran the partnership program for Bullhorn. If you guys are familiar, it's called the Marketplace. Today, I run strategy for Appcast. And strategy for Appcast has a lot to do with understanding and distilling out data and how data can help anyone who's trying to hire do a better job. Be faster, be quicker, be smarter, whatever it might be. On a personal level, I have a 3-year-old, or I have a 3rd grader. He's 8. And like many of you, we are navigating the challenges of the new school year coming up, which actually will be a bit relevant in our talk today. Last thing, I am not an economist. I'm also not an epidemiologist. I'm not a virologist, but I'm also fresh out of crystal balls. So as we try to figure out how to be more proactive and be outsmart in some ways the market to get more traction and more candidates, let's just be fair that my crystal balls are not perfect. Appcast, for those of you who don't know, is a programmatic job distribution engine. What that means is that we use data, market data and your own, mash it together in order to make all the systems out in the market, all the job boards and places you might find candidates work better for you. And better has different meanings for different people. It might mean lowering your costs. It also might be getting more out of what you're spending, or getting a better distribution for that. So using data, you can do a lot of things. And this is going to be a conversation around how we use data to do some things to make the job boards work better for us. So let's just dive right in. Is it worth mentioning, Matt, if anyone has questions, they should just throw them in the questions panel and we'll try to get to them to the end?
Absolutely. Ask questions in the questions panel. I'll moderate those questions, and if appropriate, we'll include them during the presentation, but if not, we'll definitely get to them at the end.
Awesome. Perfect. Let's do that. State of the Union. Before we jump in, I'd be remiss not to start with where we're at in the market. As of the end of July, we're at 10.2% unemployment, and even the reports coming out today is that we had over 1 million claims net new last week, which is a rise from where we have been. So that's a little concerning that downward trend on new claims has sort of popped back up a bit. This unemployment situation for many of us, we lived through it 10 years ago in the 2008 to 2010 recession, and we have a whole bunch of preconceived notions around what unemployment markets look like. So how do you live through a recession? How do you hire through one? And one of them that we've always sort of presumed is that there will be lots and lots of candidates. So it's just sort of natural, right? But this has been a little bit different of a market, as you all know. But as you can expect, right, job openings have come down. This is some data through June. We've had about 5.9 million jobs per month in June. And what you're seeing here is this really big number of unemployed people per job. So we went from having 0.9 unemployed folks in December per job opening to, the availability of almost 4 people per job opening in June. So again, that expectation is there's lots of people. We should be able to go find folks. But that hasn't really worked out. And what we saw in the data is that due to the CARES Act, due to COVID, due to lots of things, we actually had less candidates applying to jobs. And that's a problem. 1 in 3 US workers, it's actually 37%, have kids at home without at-home care, meaning there's either a single parent in a household with children or 2 working parents in the household with children. So that's affecting a big portion of our current workforce, but also our candidate base. It's also worth mentioning that when we saw the beginning of this this pandemic, one of the things that happened is the majority of people who became unemployed were in the hourly workforce. In fact, when we got through April, 40% of people who made less than $40,000 a year were unemployed. This is a heavily hourly workforce. This is our lower wage, our less educated group. Right? These elements are different than standard recessions where we would see things across the board being impacted. Then we had the CARES Act, which in many states were paying people 200 to 300% what they were making when they were working. So really a discouragement to go back to work. Then there was this hype around the HEROES Act, then there's the hype around the HEALS Act, and now there's hype around this executive order, all of which may or may not come to fruition. Even this executive order does require the states to adopt it, and we're starting to see states choose not to. The last thing that's really important to realize is that because of the change in workforce, a lot of companies are opening up their borders and saying, you know what, you don't need to be able to commute to my office, you can work remote. And so we're seeing a huge surge in people who are applying for jobs who are out of state. They're now applying to any remote job that might be able to be found. So lots of things are changing in the market that makes it actually more confusing to figure out how do you sift through it. So let's talk about how to recruit in this market. One of the things that has become really clear is that it's still hard to find a lot of people, especially the people you want and the qualified ones. A lot of different things work against you. Quick applies, people's desperation for a job, lots of different sort of elements. But you need to figure out how do you make this work for you more. Now, you can't make it perfect. There's no silver bullet yet. I wish there was. But how do you find this person that you need? And how do you make sure that he or she wants to come work for you, right? And to give them your name or their name and get engaged with your business. The problem is most of these people aren't actively looking right now that we're looking for. there's I don't know if you guys heard this technical term, it's called hunkering down. So we're seeing lots of candidates hunker down. They're like, yeah, this place is good enough for me. In February, I might have said I hate my boss. Today, they're okay. So how do we really sort of flush these people out? And part of that is being able to look through many different places. So all these different job sites that exist out in the market all have their own set of candidates that they have built through the databases, that they email, that they text message, that they have push notifications on, lots of different methods that they use, as well as the ones that just naturally come to their site and look for jobs. Sometimes in these really hard environments, you actually just have to turn over all the rocks. And turning over all the rocks is its own set of challenges. It takes a lot of effort to work with each one of these sites, get them to agree to your terms, you to agree to their terms, you have a salesperson. It's just challenging. So in some ways, it's really a better option to work with a partner like us or like Haley, who can help you manage through all of these different sites and figure out what works. All right, so let's figure out how to outmaneuver. The first thing, and I think, Matt, you will agree with me, you cannot improve what you do not measure. You have to baseline your data. So make sure you take a moment and look at all sorts of elements of your data. How many candidates does it take you to get a hire? That's what does your apply rate look like? What percentage of your candidates come via a mobile device? Are you making that easy? How hard is it for them, right? There's a lot of questions and things you need to go through, but really get a nice baseline. And I think, Matt, you guys do this as part of your efforts, right? You go through and baseline and understand what companies start from.
Yeah, when we manage the job spend for our clients, the first month is a lot of baselining in terms of we need to know, and by baseline we mean some metrics with the job application budget, with your recruitment budget, and terms of number of applications, the cost per click, the cost per application, the conversion rate, to see which job boards are working well, which job boards have higher metrics or lower metrics than we traditionally see, or even just for your company. It's going to be different based on your industry, based on your geography. You could be a industrial company in Texas. It might be different than the industrial company in the Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, or Georgia, or Milwaukee. And once we have your baseline, make a little bit of a comparison industry-wide, but then what can we do to improve? What can we do to get that cost per application better? Or maybe just, are you having jobs that have too many applications or jobs with not enough applications? Then use some of our expertise in working with clients to help match all those things together to make sure the strategy they want, the goals they have matches the strategy we need to put in place.
Yeah, and we like to think about this apply rate and the CPA as a function of two different things. So one is the actual supply and demand out in the market. So how much does it cost to get a candidate to engage with one of your jobs? So that's sort of one element. And then the other is what I call the gauntlet in which we put our candidates through. Some companies, especially in staffing, have gotten really good at nice workflows, minimal information. It's really about the follow-up and how fast and quickly and efficiently you follow up, where others are still going through the process of making candidates log into their ATS system and really creating a lot of barriers to making that process work cleanly. But there's other little tricks out there that we can do that will make our the first part, the supply and demand part, work a little bit better. So all job boards have different algorithms that they use that help increase or decrease your ability to hit a match on a candidate. And so some of the things that we want to talk about are really at the recruiter level, things that you guys can do today that will help you just artificially boost up how you land on those results pages on the job sites or on the email lists or whatever it is that they might be using. So the first one is one of my things I preach all the time: shorten your job titles. In fact, think like a candidate. The way these match systems all work is they literally say what words were typed in by said candidate, either into the profile or into the search box, and what words are in your title, and what percentage match are those. It is a really basic way to do match. Now, you should know that before they match titles, they always match location. So having a location that is clean and easy for it to match is also important. But most of the time, that's not the problem. It's usually the title. We have this Bad behavior is an industry of stuffing the title full of things, or we have a customer who wants us to use some ridiculous title that no candidate would ever search on. So you really want to make sure your marketing effort, which is your job titles, are thinking like a candidate. How do we get the candidate title to match our, what the candidate's typing in? So that's the goal here. And as you can see, when we put these numbers in here, right, the percentage of apply rate, if your apply rate is higher, your CPA is lower. It's a simple way to think about it. So if you can get titles under 3 words, magic. If you can get it under 6, pretty good. Once you're over 6 words, you've really gone too far. There's too many words. You really have to focus on getting rid of terms. There's one exception. If you have a part-time position, you should include the word part-time, because that is actually a term that people often will search on. So make sure that's part of it. Do you have anything to add on that, Matt, or should I just jump to this next one?
No, I think a little bit was the apply rate. Can you explain quickly what you mean by apply rate there? And then also, I think building off that part-time, in the beginning of the pandemic, work from home or WFH and remote, the traffic for that went through the roof. So that would definitely be another kind of exception to the rule here, just because that's what people are searching. We have to think about even like when you go to Google and search for something in your personal life. What are you typing into Google? That's literally, pretty much the same tactic when someone goes to a job board to search. That's the same process. So that's where work from home, I think, had a big impact. But if you could dig into what apply rate is to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Yep. When I talk about apply rate, it's the click to application. So what that means is if your apply rate, as we have for the 1 to 3 group, is 7.1%, that means it takes 100 clicks to get 7.1 applications. The whole point here, though, is if we went down to like 10 words, we get half the applications, we get 3.9. So really making sure that we have the right words means that more people will actually match. It gets a better match, which drives more applications. So there's sort of multiple things that happen to drive people to finish their application process. And one of them is making sure that the job in front of them matches their interest. And when we have long titles, there's more likely to be a mismatch. They click on it, they read the description, they realize it's not what they wanted. But if you're working on a pay-per-click model, or you're working even with a regular vendor that has duration postings, those are wasted clicks. It's wasted opportunity where you wanted to get in front of the right candidates that are engaged. Another way to think about this is if your titles are long and wonky, half the candidates you should be getting on a match, you're not getting, because somebody with a better title is getting the eyeballs. And so you're missing out on half of your opportunity.
We have a question it does help. A chat from John was, how does pay rate come into play here in the title? By putting it actually in the title, not just included in what you send over, what you post. Like if you put, in healthcare, it's usually a little unique, but if you put $30 an hour in the title, how does that come into play?
So it actually can hurt you and help you in the same breath. But there's an interesting little trick you can do that sort of wins on both fronts, which is open your description with it. So most of job sites, either via email or via push notification, like all the different methods, you get the opening line or so of your description. So if you have to put in some other terminology that may not help you with your match, the thing to do is put it at the beginning of the description. So pay rate is X, and then just start your pitch from there. That's a good way to compromise on it. Pay rates can help you but it won't help you get the right person. They may help you get more clicks, more engagement, but you may not necessarily get the right person because you're going to lower your match rate. It's a nuanced answer.
Sure is. A lot of that is.
All right, let's jump to this next one. This one is always interesting to people. The day of the week that you post your job matters. The day of the week that you post your job matters. So Matt's going to show us in a few minutes about the age of the job and how that impacts things. What you're looking at here is something kind of interesting. This is actually new data. I'm going to push this out in a big benchmark report in the next couple of weeks. So if you guys are interested, just maybe throw that in the questions panel and just let us know, and we'll make sure we send this to you, or Matt will make sure he sends it to you because I'll ask him to nicely. But what you're looking at here is in the blue, pre-COVID, and in the green, post-COVID. I've actually created my own version of quarters. They're modified Q1 and modified Q2. Q1 is through March 15th, and Q2 starts on March 16th through June 30th. And what you're seeing here is the different costs in those two quarters that it, on average, costs to acquire a candidate and the different apply rates that are happening on the different days of the week. The takeaway for you here is Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays are bad. Don't post your job on Friday, because if you post your job on Friday, one, it's more expensive, and you have less traffic, more clicking, less applying through Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, which are also your prime days for finding candidates. So if you're going to post jobs, you really want to capitalize on the first 4 days of the week, preferably actually Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So really think about how you currently post jobs out to the market. You will waste a lot of activity of less engaged candidates in the back half of a week.
Oh, I agree there. I think I like to, it's a little bit of a fine line we walk here, because you want those jobs up Monday morning. So
yes,
sometimes I prefer almost getting them up on Sunday, which, you know, you really have to watch your data to make sure you're not, cost per application isn't going through the roof. But I just feel like those Sunday night people who are dreading the Monday morning alarm, that's the battle, or just what you have to look at with your own data, because it might work better for your company, where another company, it might be unsuccessful.
Absolutely. These are big averages, right? These are averages across the board. What's interesting that you just said is actually Sunday night is when I recommend people post. So I'm saying don't post on Sunday, but because job boards overall are not real time, even though they're ambitiously hoping to get there, they still run everything through big file feeds that take time to index and so forth. The like the best time to get a candidate is Monday at noontime still, even during COVID times. So that Sunday night gives the job board the opportunity to get the job, index it, get into the email feed that it's going to send out that morning, which will land in front of your candidate somewhere mid-morning to noontime, which is when you want to have your job in front of them. Same thing on Tuesday and Wednesday. If you're going to post them at the very end of the day so you can catch that morning run. That's really the goal there. One of the other things that we looked at was this change in cost per application by state. And I apologize, somehow I neglected Alaska and Hawaii here, but I promise they'll be in the real report. What was really interesting to me is how cost per application changed based on what was happening with the COVID situation. And you can really see that Northeast quadrant, the cost went really high. I'm not sure what was happening in Vermont, but it was getting very expensive to hire people in Vermont for a while. And that had a lot to do with, again, those keywords, right, were being used, but still like people were locking down. Those companies that were successful though were using words like remote or safety, touchless, PPE, still to think about in your job descriptions or even in your titles if you have to help engagement with the different candidates in the market. I do think this would look different if I were to pull it again in September, because July, August, September is going to look be a very different look and feel in the U.S. Than the April, May, June timeframe. I apologize for the eye chart, but another one just to consider is that actually your industry matters. Different industries really do have different apply rates. They have different costs. And so you have to make sure you're not just looking at the overall averages. You're starting to really dive into how does my particular industries that I support look. And so even if you're more of a generalist organization, you're going to want to work with someone that can help you understand the different types of jobs you work through and what those things should be looking like. Am I on par with the industry? Am I above or below? Does the data really make sense, or do I need to really shift what I'm doing? So take stock in the industries that you work in, because they really do have big variability in cost. Even today, if you're looking for truck drivers, they're still very expensive, and of course, nurses are very challenging to find, and that shouldn't be a surprise. But oftentimes, some of the other positions do surprise folks that it's easier to find HR people today than it is to find people in sales, for example, which is often surprising to folks.
Yeah, the market rate is really big, I think, and that's where sometimes when I think companies think about programmatic, and I've been telling them, literally this quote recently is, we don't have a secret treasure of candidates that we're hiding. We can help you get to that market rate or become more efficient with trying to get applications at that market rate, but like in healthcare or IT or transportation, those are really hard industries to find, and all of a sudden your application rate isn't going to, or cost per application, isn't going to decrease by 50% all of a sudden. You can make that budget go a little farther and more efficient, but that market rate's out there for a reason, and
yeah,
this doesn't fix it. You can just maybe get a little more out of it than you were previously.
Yeah, and market rates are interesting because of the dependence on the application process. It's really a personal rate. It's not just the market rate. The market rate is really about CPC. When you talk about market CPAs, it's a combination of that CPC and your apply rate to get your own personal market rate, which is a little funny for folks to realize that. So that's where industry rates and understanding what the market itself is doing so you can compare is so important. Another thing, if you have not applied for one of your jobs lately on your mobile device, always a good practice. Mobile is rising. And you see this green applies number. The clicks are getting, they're starting to taper off. So it looks like people are going to sort of slow down their clicking, but applies are not. People are continuing to increasingly apply for jobs on the mobile device. If you go through that process and I have to go find a resume, it's really hard. A lot of people still have not committed to putting their resume in Dropbox or Google Drive or one of those options. And even when they have, a lot of times the ATSs have a hard time getting those and pulling them in. So make sure you have ways to work around that so that candidates can still engage with you and you can find out who they are. Worry about the resume later. Another thing we measure is how long it takes to apply for a job or how many questions you ask. I was just doing a webinar the other day with another organization who measured, and they found out that 3 minutes is your magic number. If it takes more than 3 minutes to apply for a job, you might as well take 45, right? They said you have a little bit of a wiggle room, maybe to 5 or 6 minutes, but you really need to get it to that 3 minute mark. Here's the interesting thing that we have found. If you are in a position where your application process has to take longer than 3 minutes, hopefully not 45, tell people on the application process itself how long it's going to take. Set the expectation. This application process will take you 12 minutes. There's this incredible thing that happens when people know how long it's going to be versus the endless another page, another page, another page, or the not quite so clear scroll bar that's like, oh, you're like a third of the way through. Good job, right? Really want to make sure you're setting expectations and telling people how long it's going to take. And on the questions, it's always good to go through them with a critical eye. I did look at one the other day for a staffing firm, and they required middle name. And I was like, do we really need middle name today, guys? Like, is this really the time we need to know this piece of information? Or can we maybe like wait until later to find out their middle name? Right, so make sure that you're not asking for things that you really don't need to know. They could probably wait for another day. Matt, do you have anything on that one? Or you want me to just jump?
No, this part I think is interesting because we're obviously very, pro in the camp of short application because mobile increases, the whole resume thing on mobile, or just, I think it almost changes the mindset of what that initial application is. Like, and I know it has to be an internal battle with some companies, not just in staffing, but in traditional HR too, to where how much of that legal and compliance and information do you really need the first capture of that candidate information? Or do you just need name, email, phone number, maybe a resume, a couple more pieces of information if you really want to try to qualify for your recruiters to minimize their downtime? It's that mindset change, I think, that's really fascinating. And it opened my eyes from one of the first times we started to work with Appcast a couple of years ago was, they give benchmarks for cost per application, and one of the variables is length of application. And one of the original, I think the shortest category was under 15 minutes, which shows how those other categories were probably 15 to 30 or 35 to 40.
Yeah.
And that's a long time for someone to spend to fill out a job application when they may never even hear from a company that's really poor with communication. So it's setting those expectations up front and making it easy for someone to send their information will improve conversion rates.
Yep. And just simply improving conversion rates lowers your costs and increases your volume. It's sort of like a double-edged win. Like it's all things lead to good things, especially with staffing where we're always pipelining. We're always looking for the name, just get the next person. How do we get in contact with them? How do we connect with them? How do we find out if this is the right person for us in one of our many opportunities? Creating friction or creating barriers to getting to who that person is definitely not in the best interest of the organization. I think this one is yours, Matt.
Yeah, now we're gonna pivot over a little bit to some research we did on our side here at Haley Marketing, where Appcast has a lot of awesome information. You know, they work with hundreds of companies, you know, across the board. Where, you know, at Haley Marketing, we really, you know, we work with the staffing industry, and we were looking at trying to answer some of the questions that we get a lot, either from, you know, phone calls with clients, phone calls from prospects, phone calls from companies where, you know, just have digital marketing services with us or with website projects. So the first one that you hear a lot is, you know, does the job posting age affect performance? And what I mean by that is, if you post a job on August 1st, is it going to get the same performance on August 10th, August 20th, September 1st, et cetera? So the first example here really digs into, it was maintenance jobs at hospitals in California. You know, we have a company out on the West Coast that, you know, they hire from clinical side, non-clinical side. And the information on the left is when they first posted the job. So there was a 3 to 4 week period where they had the job turned on, had the job turned off, and it started to downward trend, but not terribly. And what we did for them was a couple months later, you know, the data on the left was from March, the data on the right is from May. We used a feature in actually Appcast software called job title expansion, to where we took these jobs and we created new jobs based on job titles or based on geographic location. And, you know, those jobs that appeared to be created May 15th versus the jobs created March 15th performed much better. They performed basically 10x better, to where those new jobs were getting more clicks. Cost per click was about the same. Cost per application was lower, but people were just clicking on them more often, which means they were being seen more often. The other metrics were very similar, right? The apply rate was a little off, cost per application a little bit different, but the algorithm was just showing jobs, the newer jobs, to people more. People were clicking on those jobs more often. So the job posting age definitely had a huge impact here in terms of performance for the maintenance jobs at the hospitals.
Yeah, and we have a bunch of data on this as well. One of the things that we have found is you basically have, depending on the kind of job, a handful of days to maximize opportunity where it doesn't cost you more to get at the top. So job boards are all optimized for those new jobs because they know that candidates are more likely to engage with a new job, right? Because they're like new, and we've trained candidates that you need to be first in because you don't want to be the 800th candidate on this particular job. You want to be at the beginning. And because they also know that you are more likely to hire somebody who comes in at the beginning, because your recruiters don't wait 30 days for the candidates to all come in and then shuffle them up so it's random and then start interviewing at that point in time, like you might do if you're a government organization overseas, which is how they do things. Here, we're like, oh, somebody applied, I'm on them. Like, you just jump right on these people. So for most hourly jobs, we know that a job has its optimal performance in the first 3 days. And for most professional jobs, you can get 5 to 7 days out of that job, which basically means if your jobs are more than a week old, you are not on page 1, 2, or 3. You are way down in the stack. And so we have absolutely found the same data that Matt's found. You get more juice for the squeeze without having to spend a penny more by simply, making the jobs new.
Yeah, we looked at it for a couple more clients here. On the next slide was industrial company in Northeast Ohio where they're trying to hire maintenance mechanics, and that's a really tough job for them. And it showed, they got 48 applications over this period, and 40 of them came in the first 20 days, right? Really backing up what Leah almost said, that nearly 40% of those applications came in the first 5 days. And the clicks just started to go down after about day 20 to where, conversion rates were pretty similar for all this almost 2-month period. Cost per application was, it's up and down, but it's not crazy at the end. It's just people aren't clicking on your jobs because they're older. So this is a really, another data set that backs up. It's our second one of 3 that really backs up. It shows that first 20 days, how the applications came in, the clicks just started to go downward after those first couple of weeks. And that's where companies get frustrated. And I think it also underscores in staffing, our CEO, David Stern, says this all the time. Speed is as vital as anything. Like, you'll pay a little bit more for an application on day 1 or 2 if it gets you that placement by day 3 or 4, because every day, every shift, every hour that job is unfilled, that's lost revenue. So the speed aspect here on our second example backs it up, and it's going to show it on the third one as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? You can have the cheapest clicks you want and the cheapest applications you want on day 50, but really, is that of any value if there are none or only one, right? So it is exactly what you're saying. And staffing obviously feels it more than anyone. Every day that they're not putting someone to work, they're not making their revenue numbers.
And here's the last one, talking about the hardest industry almost out there right now. This was one of our newest clients that went from almost a surplus of drivers, which almost seems untrue or unbelievable or good for them, to now a lack of drivers where they're just getting crushed with orders. So you can see it right here to where the decrease in impressions even starts. And what impressions means is the number of times your ad is seen. So think of it, a physical billboard when we used to drive to work that you would see on the road or maybe on public transportation, to where how many times is that ad seen, or how many times is that billboard seen? That's what it is in the digital space, right? How many times is your job posting seen each day or each week? Those decreased, right? Most of the applications, nearly more than 2/3 of them came in the first 10 days. Was the CPA higher at the start? Yes, it was. But you know what? Speed is vital here, and speed wins, because that's what's most important, is you're in front of those people looking for jobs on day, the first 5 days that they get posted.
Yep.
And we're getting a lot of questions in the chat here about how to beat the system here almost. And, does job posting age affect performance? Yes. And my biggest tip here, I think, is, to follow a process of, how many times should we be posting the jobs, or what should we do to take advantage of this? And really the best way is, once you have that job in your ATS and it gets passed out to Indeed or to ZipRecruiter, to the other job boards, you have to close out your job and open a new one, because the job board algorithms are smart enough to know if Matt opened the job on August 3rd, then all of a sudden today on August 20th, I just put the new date is August 20th. They have what's called an index date. They know what your job title is, the job order number is, the job description is. They know Matt originally posted that job on August 3rd. You're not outsmarting the algorithm and the computers to say 17 days later, this is a brand new job. So close out your job order. The job title can stay the same. It needs a new job ID or a job number. You might want to change up the description to really make sure you're getting to the top, about that 20 to 30% of your job description range. But that's the best practice to follow to make sure your jobs are staying at the top of the search results.
Yeah, a lot of the job sites have gotten really smart in their indexing, where they actually look for a match in the job description. And if it's a perfect match or it's really close, that's enough for it to say this is actually not new. And so thank you very much, but we need you to do more. So it's really about, refresh it, or not just refresh it, shut it down, open a new one, alter the title if you can, or alter the description, which is actually, they're more interested in the content of the description. They look for the number of words and they look to see if the words match. So definitely make changes in the description to try to help yourself.
And this next kind of data set we looked at here was a question that is very interesting and probably could get a whole webinar on itself is, have job applications rate drop during COVID in the staffing industry? Did the federal employment bonus, did safety of workers, did childcare coverage have an impact? Because there's studies there on both sides here, and we wanted to dig into the data and really look at it. And this first company in Georgia, we looked at 3 different time periods, right? We looked at May to July last year, May to July this year, and also December to February to give us a little bit of a baseline, because March and April were so, probably to use one of Leah's terms, wonky. It was the data, it was a definition of outliers, because nobody knew what the heck was going on for a solid 2, 4, 6 weeks. And we looked at this data and it just showed, there's a big increase in CPA here for this client, right? About over 100%, which is actually pretty similar to, I think, the data Appcast has seen in terms of CPA increase from January 2020 to July 2020. But that's a really big increase over the last year, right? Their conversion rate decreased a lot. These are very similar jobs in terms of pay rate and number of jobs, to where they're struggling to get candidates. And it's a struggle we hear from everyone. So this data definitely backed up that claim of, did job applications decrease in COVID?
Yeah, and I actually pulled some data just earlier this week. I was interested in seeing how the summer slowdown of last year compared to this year, because, we usually see CPAs go down a little bit in June, July, and August. People on vacation, they're not as engaged. They get to go home on midday on Friday, whatever it is. And so typically, like in July and August, we see about a 5% decrease in, about a 5% decrease in CPAs. And what we found over the last couple of months is we're really starting to see it go up in terms of our CPAs. So the CPAs are not going down, they are going up even through the summer. The first 2 weeks of August, surprisingly, have really driven up our costs. I kind of thought we would see a lot more people come on to the market and clicking. So I definitely expected higher click rates over the last couple of weeks, but I actually expected more applications as well. And interestingly, people are not kind of completing that process. They're still sort of surfing the jobs. And a part of it, I guess, is that a lot of the people are trying to figure out what is safe, what are the schools going to do, do I need to be home, or can I go back to work? It's a big question right now.
It is. And the last example for me before we turn it back over to the Appcast part of the presentation was a client in Pennsylvania. And this one I thought was really interesting. And there's a lot of data on the page. We looked at the same time frames, right? That May to July, the last 2 years, and also December to February. And you can see, right, conversion rates dropped for the low paying jobs, 12 to 14, cost per application increased. Same thing happened at $15 to $16 an hour jobs, right? Conversion rates decreased, CPA increased, but there was a tipping point at $17 an hour to where they were getting more applies, right? The conversion rate actually increased, the cost per application decreased. And that was the comfort level for these candidates in this geographic area, in this industry. And we also, at Haley Marketing have weekly consulting classes. And, we heard an example today of a client where they were struggling to get placements, right? They had 30 open jobs, couldn't get any placements. And they increased the pay by $1 an hour, like worked with the client, fought for that $1 an hour increase. That flipped the whole thing. And they were able to place almost all of those 30 openings because of that increase. So it's a challenge. It's working with your clients to see what you can pay, pay rates and bill rates and all those different numbers that have to work out. But if your clients you can't help them fill those open jobs, maybe the pay rate isn't good enough because of that uncertainty with childcare, with safety, with the unemployment bonuses that I think 10 or 11 states now was just passed, the extra $300 a month that's coming out I saw today. So that's the data that really to look at, where the low paying jobs are the ones we're hearing a lot of struggling, and that's a lot of high volume hiring in staffing. So maybe really examine pay rates in your area to compare it to your open jobs, your competitors, to market rates, and come armed with data to those discussions to make your case.
Yeah, I think you're right, Matt. You have to do the math in your state around what unemployment looks like for an individual in terms of, what percentage do they get for unemployment plus whatever the unemployment insurance bonuses happen to be, where they all work out. Do the 300, do they get the bonus from the state on the 400? What is the funding time frame? Because this does have a finite fuse on it. There's a lot of questions there, but make sure you understand, and how many hours is it, right? Because all of those things matter. You need to be able to show your employers what the exact break-even point is. There's also a little caveat here. You need to remember, in certain states, the state does not automatically take out income taxes out of unemployment. So for a lot of people who are unemployed, it actually feels like a bit of a bump that they are also getting. They do owe those taxes still, but they're not feeling it. And so you have to mentally keep that in mind, that they might actually be calculating how much money they're making without that tax burden. So it's nuanced for sure, but it's important to really know what that break-even point looks like. And if you're under it, you will struggle to find folks because they are also doing that math. I think this is yours, Matt. So
that is yours. The answer to the question was yes to both of the questions. So the age of the job posting really affects performance. Job applications have decreased since COVID in staffing. So the question back to Leah is, what do we do? How do we fix those black holes?
It's a great question. How do we fix it? So it's interesting because staffing, unlike corporate, is a little different, right? And on some level, it's like everybody is good. I want them all. Pipeline, pipeline, pipeline. But actually, oftentimes, that's not as good of a strategy as we'd like. What we really want is a particular pipeline of X number of candidates per type of job or opening that we work through. There is actually limited value in getting the 600th candidate for a warehouse position that's a small warehouse in Pennsylvania if you don't have additional clients nearby that you can reshuffle these people for. So part of what we want to do is sort of create controls to make sure that we stop getting all these candidates, many who may be unqualified, and get into finding just the candidates we need, maybe a few more names as reserves, but not sort of going crazy, just getting names for the sake of getting names. We are at some point going to run out of all of these fun bonuses for unemployment, and we are going to see a shift in candidate behavior. They are going to start applying en masse, which could be good or could be very bad depending upon your business and if you have the ability to disposition and deal with these people. Right? Having a bad candidate experience, it doesn't matter if you're staffing or if you're a great consumer brand. You really do want to make sure your brand is protected and that you are able to connect with and engage at some level with the candidates that come into your business. So how do we fix it? So we're obviously driving towards this construct of programmatic. Programmatic, again, is this idea that enables you to control what's happening out in the market in order to make the money that you have available to you to buy candidates work as best as possible. And that best might have lots of different flavors to it. For some people, that could be all the volume of warehouse people in the Northeast quadrant all day long, twice on Tuesdays, go, 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 go. For someone else who may be doing staffing in the marketing and creative space may say, look, I need to find a handful of folks in this position and another handful over in this and another handful over in that. And so having these different strategies to manage through your goals is going to be part of the challenge that you have, and where this kind of technology can really be helpful. It also is able to do things that you just possibly can't do in your head. Right? It can use the data available to help you understand what you should be paying, where, and for how long. Right? So the data itself, if you're working with a good engine, will be a whole baseline underneath the technology that knows that you need to pay X CPC or X CPA in order to get candidates for that kind of position. and on which job sites you're going to find them, because it's watching what's happening in the overall market and saying, oh, there's candidates coming out of this particular job site right now that really matches. They're like, oh, look, Facebook's actually delivering a bunch of school bus drivers. This is great. Let's go do more advertising there. So you want to make sure you are using the data you have available to you to make your system work as best as possible. And for those of you who are curious, it sort of works like this. Everything starts from your ATS. So you have obviously your ATS, you put your jobs in. Your jobs come out of your ATS through lots of different methods and mechanisms. Often it's XML or an API or scrapers, if all else fails. There's this construct of the bids, which can be done by an agency like Haley, or could be done by technology. And then those bids, along with your jobs, go out to the various job sites that they belong, wherever you're going to have success. That will drive candidates. And then when those candidates come back, or if they don't, both of those are really important signals to the system to understand what it needs to change. If you're getting too many candidates coming too fast, it means bid down. Bring those bids down. You're paying too much. If you're not getting candidates fast enough, it means you're not paying enough and you need to bump those up. So it's really about figuring out that balance. The last piece of it is how to get them to as many as possible, right? You do not want to manage all of these different sites out in the market yourself. You definitely want someone who can help you. If you're working with a handful, an agency like Haley is a great option. Haley, like any other agency, can also add in a job ad exchange, which really does a good job of picking up all of the different variables out there and not having to manage each relationship individually. So wrapping up, what does it do? It can help you get candidates for all of your jobs. That's sort of goal one for most people. Like, just get me as many inbound candidates as possible. And use rules to cut off those jobs that the job boards really like. So one of the things we didn't talk about is job boards will find jobs they really are doing well with, and their idea of well is people are clicking on them, and they will oversample them. So they'll just keep showing them, even if you don't actually want those candidates, and or they're not converting into candidates. They might just be clicks, right? The worst thing you could have is a job that gets lots and lots of clicks that you pay for that never turn into candidates. That is truly wasted money at its finest. Oftentimes when you implement a programmatic system, that's about 10% of your jobs. All of a sudden you find you've got 10% of your money back to do more with. It will help you find the right price to pay for things. It really does help solve the complexity of all of these pieces that we talked about. And I think the big piece is you can't do a lot of these calculations manually. You really do need technology to be able to sort through all of this data. So as we look into the fall is uncertain. You still have goals. You need to be agile. Use data and use your knowledge. You guys can outsmart your competitors, I'm sure of it. So thank you, Matt, for giving me this time to talk to everybody.
It's been awesome to have you. It's been hopefully helpful for the audience. We've had a lot of really good questions that we were answering in the chat, a lot around job descriptions, how often to refresh posts, and whatnot, but it's been really hopefully educational for the crowd here.
I hope so. And I mentioned that benchmark report again. If anyone's interested, you can either just let us know in the chat, or when we follow up, feel free to just ask. We should be releasing it in about 2 weeks, so I'm excited to let you guys see that.
Yeah, one of the questions from the chat was, should you always include pay rate?
Ooh, it's a good question. I think yes, but I said I think yes. The bad part of not doing it is that a lot of the job sites are guessing it for you anyway. And the worst thing they could do is highball you. Like, oh, this job is going to pay $40 an hour. And so you get a bunch of candidates clicking and applying, and then you're like, oh no, it's actually only $19. I don't want to talk to you anymore. So in some ways it's almost better because they're going to do it to you anyway. If the pay rate is really low, that's where it gets tough, because you're going to still screen people out, but that also might be a good data point to go back to your clients with.
That was a good answer. That was pretty much my answer. I think, because job boards will look at their data to say if you're hiring for a a CNC operator in Kansas City, they're going to look at their database to say, if you don't have pay rate in there, to say this is what we think it should be, because that's the information candidates want. It also gets into play Google for Jobs too, to where they want pay rate too, which is not in the programmatic space, but it's definitely a fantastic way to get your jobs promoted.
Yeah, it's interesting because the Google for Jobs shift that happened has really done a lot to sort of set some standards that didn't exist before, which is kind of nice. Like location has now become an address, which is actually kind of bad for staffing who sort of wants to mask this, but good for corporations who really want to make sure they're getting geo-fenced candidates. And it does start to open up this opportunity of doing a lot of interesting things on the mobile device for candidates. And so there's going to be compromises made in the space to make sure that we are getting candidates the most information available that you can, while obviously protecting your opportunity with your clients.
I think the other question we had that was really interesting and not 100% related today was, it was from Robin. For a staffing firm, are you recommending we mention upfront the industry we're hiring for? And from my thought process, where we really consult and educate on job descriptions is what's in it for me. And that means the candidate. Yep. So if you can say, this is a great opportunity in, the telecommunications industry where second shift opportunity to move the first shift maybe, or attempt to hire position, maybe put that in the beginning of the description to really connect with your job seeker, because some people might want to work in one industry, some people might not want to work in the same industry. So that's where I would recommend putting that information.
Yeah, I agree. The WIFM is so important, that what's in it for me. In fact, when you write your job descriptions, it's always important to go back and read them and make sure you're answering that question. I think one of the things that companies do that's a disservice to themselves is they open the description with information about the staffing firm, like, oh, we're great and how amazing we are, and we're top 10 staffing firm to work for. And some of that might be good for the candidate, but it's probably not the first thing they're interested in. Right, so the WIFM isn't just what's in it for them. It's also making sure that the order in which you provide information helps them, like leads them down the journey of where they want to go. So you may want to start with things that are interesting to them, such as the key parts of the position and that career path, if there is one, or that where opportunities it's going to lead to, or why it's a good opportunity for somebody. And then lead them down the path of, and it's an awesome place to work, and it's fun and benefits and so forth. Which is actually another thing, to the degree you can mention benefits, that will increase your engagement rate. So candidates love benefits, and benefits are everything from the healthcare options and 401ks to even just like lunches or community, some sort of community that they'll be a part of. So any type of benefit that you can provide candidates will help with their engagement.
Right now, it's pretty much all the questions we have. I want to make sure we mention our next webinar, which is on Wednesday, August 26th, to where we're going to flip this entirely. And our CEO, David Stearns, is going to talk about, some of the great marketing packages and deals and innovative solutions, affordable solutions we've put together to help sell staffing, to help you get more of those job orders right now, which is obviously a challenge when markets flip to more of a downturn in the economic side. So David will be talking about, different ways, different packages that will help nurture, cultivate those relationships with your target markets to get more job orders on the sales side. So that'll be Wednesday, August 26th, next week at 2 p.m. You can sign up at lunchwithhaley.com to make sure you are registered. Thank you, Leah, for joining us today. The slide deck will be available. We'll send it out. It'll be also available on lunchwithhaley.com if you want to catch the webinar on demand. But it's been awesome to help our audience here with some super simple tactics to get more out of that job board spend.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us, everyone, today. Take care.